Welcome to On Air Minds. I'm Dr. Brenda Wilson,
And Dr. Russ Witcher.
and we are two journalism professors here at Tennessee Tech. On this podcast, we sit down with other faculty and talk academics, personal interests, and teaching experiences.
I remember when Mouse was released. Was it originally considered to be a graphic novel, or did that term even exist?
Spiegelman's Mouse actually was serialized in an underground comic called Raw. Spiegelman was one of the underground comics artists. That underground meaning they're not from one of the big companies. They're not sold on newsstands, so they don't need that stamp. So anything goes, you know. And so he told that a chapter at a time over many years throughout the 1980s until he had gotten enough of them that he collected them into an album that was part one of Mouse. So it wasn't all released at once originally. It was in monthly segments, issue by issue by issue. So it was a comic book.
All right.
Before it was a graphic novel.
And there are 2 volumes, right?
Yes. Yes. Or, I like to assign the one where it has the combined both volumes and has the whole thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Complete. We talked a little bit about your book earlier. Its subtitle is Race Comics and the Evolution of the Superhero. I guess first, when did your book come out? It looks pretty recent.
It came out in June.
June,
of last
okay.
year.
Not even a year old
University
yet.
Press of Mississippi.
Okay.
All
I guess just what's the major, theme to take away, sort of, what is it? Is this class, is that an extension of what some of the themes in your class, that textbook?
All the work that I did researching and writing the book led into me having the idea of creating a
For the
class
course.
about
Okay.
the history of comics, and particularly how it tied in with what's going on in the world at any particular time. My PhD, my primary specialty is race and ethnicity, and with a focus on African American and Native American and where they converge. So that gives me, background in all of that. And so the book is an extension of that. I was really taking the things I was learning in grad school, studying with people like David Roediger, about the development of the concepts of whiteness and stuff, and recognizing that coming through in the comics at the time. And what I particularly noticed in those letters pages, I was reading through The Master of Kung Fu, or Shang-Chi, and I noticed this same name popping up in the letters pages. Often his name was Bill Wu. And there were other people who were Asian American that were writing in to complain about the representation of Asians. And then the editors were defending themselves, being very defensive about it, and it continued over years. Eventually, the editors changed some of the stuff about how they presented. And so I thought, is this happening in Black Panther? Is this happening in Luke Cage also? So I started looking at them. And essentially what I saw and what I concluded, and kind of the purpose of the theme of the book, is that once artists and writers, well, initially fans of color, participated in this partnership with the publishers, writers, and artists in helping to craft these representations, racial representations, and make them more authentic. And once more people of color got into the industry and could tell their own stories, then it became even more authentic. So that what we see now on the screen, if we watch Luke Cage, is not the very stereotyped 1970s comic book Luke Cage, where everybody was a jive turkey. The fans had an impact, and fans of color in particular had an impact in changing the direction of the industry.
Okay, thanks.
Watchmen, I know that it was a movie with Liam Neeson, wasn't it? Did he play the character?
No.
It was not. That was not.
No, Liam
Different.
Neeson wasn't in Watchmen. I'm not sure.
Okay.
He's been in a bunch of stuff.
Okay. Well, anyway, is that considered to be the best of the genre? I mean, it seems like so many people refer to that.
It was either Time. I think it was Time Magazine, Time, or the New York Times.
I saw that.
Listed it as one of the best
One,
novels,
the
Period.
100 best
not graphic novels,
English
Mhm.
language novels. Or something?
novels.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And so, yes, it is. Every time you reread it, the depth of it is such that you catch things you didn't before. It has a powerful statement overall,
Mhm.
and it has so many layers of complexity. Although there are, issues with it, as there are with anything, a reflection of its time.
Yeah.
The way that women are portrayed was different 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Than would be acceptable now, for example. But yes, generally speaking, that and Mouse
Mhm.
Mhm.
are considered probably the two best examples of sequential art literature.
You mentioned you like Spider-Man. What were some of your other favorite comic books growing up? I know you have a background in writing about Westerns, so I was
Mhm.
going to guess it might be some of those cowboy comics, but
I loved those.
yeah.
And in fact, I got to interview Stan Lee
Oh,
by taking the angle that I bet nobody asked him about the Western comics he wrote.
mm-hmm.
Huh.
So I was able to get in. So yeah, I loved everything. I loved westerns. I really loved the Marvel adaptations of the Conan stories. I loved Spider-Man, various other superheroes. Actually,
Mhm.
as I went through life, sort of my favorite superhero would change depending on where I was in life. When I was an angsty teenager, I went through a Daredevil phase.
Mm-hmm.
And as an adult, I think my favorite superhero character, is Captain America, just because his real power is what a good person he is.
Yeah.
Standing up for
Mhm.
what's right,
Mhm.
not patriotic jingoism, but just standing up for principles.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of different types. I would buy everything that I could afford with what I could get mowing yards. Of course, when I
Yeah.
first started, they were 20 cents a piece.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That was a lot easier than $5 a piece or whatever they are now.
And now they've reinvented Captain America as a different has a different lead now, right?
Yeah, and that happened in the comics.
Okay.
The Falcon,
Uh-huh.
Sam Wilson, and I was very disappointed when Captain America Winter Soldier came out and they introduced the character of Sam Wilson. I was really disappointed that nobody in media that I saw anywhere pointed out
They didn't.
he was the first African American superhero in comic books.
Uh-huh.
Not the first black superhero. The Black Panther came before him, but he's not
Mhm.
African American.
Mm-hmm.
He's African. The
Yeah.
Falcon was the first African American superhero from a mainstream company, and he was Captain America's partner. And in the 70s, they had equal billing in the book. They had a picture of each of them. The title was not Captain America, it's Captain America and the Falcon.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, when Captain America retired, who better to replace him,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
His
then the
longtime
Falcon.
partner. And then they did the same thing in the movies, which I think is a cool way to approach it.
Mm-hmm.
In my
Yes.
law class, we cover obscenity, and one of the cases that we cover is, I think, the Ralph Ginsburg case. Are you familiar with that? Was he friends with? I think he was friends with William Gaines. Is why.
Okay.
Is why I'm thinking about him.
Oh, is it Allen Ginsberg, the poet?
No, it wasn't him. I believe his name was Ralph. There actually are two obscenity cases. One's Ginsburg with a Z, and one's Ginsburg with an S.
Oh.
And I get them. I get them
Okay.
mixed up.
This is Ginsburg Z.
Yeah.
But one thing that I remember about
Sounds
that
like a
case,
superhero.
he was prosecuted for selling several books in magazines, but my favorite title was The Housewife's Handbook for Selective Promiscuity. It's like, I'm going to be promiscuous, but I'm going to be selective
Mhm.
in my promiscuity. I mean, it's just, I talk about those cases about, people talking about things really other than the content. Like, was it pandered? Was it sold as if it were obscene? Forget the fact that it may not be obscene, but you marketed it in that way.
Yes,
Mm.
yes. And actually, in the 1950s, even before the underground comics movement, which got underway in the late 60s, in the 50s, there were these publishers that would they weren't a mainstream publisher, and there were like things centered on BDSM,
Mm-hmm.
things like that were, a store clerk might have under the counter, and if
Mm.
you knew to ask for it, would sell it to you,
Yeah.
not display it,
Mhm.
and then they could get arrested for that if that violated
Decency.
Joe Shuster. artist who co-created Superman,
Mhm.
they got $300 for Superman.
Wow.
$300. And by the 50s, his fortunes had fallen so much that he was primarily getting work at illustrating these S&M
Hmm.
books that were sold under the counter that were considered obscene. And if you happen to get a look at them, it's really weird because of his style. It's Clark Kent and Lois Lane.
Ah,
Oh.
wow.
I mean, the same
Uh-huh.
artistic style.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so that was going on. In fact, some of the people that started the comic book industry, not necessarily the artists and writers, but the business people on the business end of it, had previously been heavily involved in the hot and spicy pulps
Yeah.
or girly magazines
Hmm.
in the 1930s that were risque just to the point, of being illegal. And at one point in the 50s, Stan Lee and his Marvel staff were sharing office space with Stag magazine.
Wow.
That's how far the fortunes of comics, I guess, had fallen.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that sordid connection as well. And some of the people who started the industry had connections with the mob.
Yeah.
Hmm. Looking at the cowboy genre, do you think it was so popular, or was it influenced by the fact that there was the censorship and the restrictions on the other content? The cowboy content was a little bit, I guess, easier to write with all those restrictions,
The
or was it the just
biggest
television?
period of the popularity of the Western comics, the biggest period, was they
Mhm.
burst into popularity around 1948, several years before the censorship,
Ah.
around the same time as the horror comics.
Okay.
But I think the popularity of more juvenile oriented Saturday matinee
Mhm.
cowboys and TV shows like Gene Autry and Roy Rogers and Lash LaRue, they're so popular. Dell Comics got the licensing for them because kids are going to buy that.
Right.
They recognize Gabby Hayes
Yeah.
had his own title. He was like the whiskered sidekick. And, various horses,
Mm.
Trigger and Champion
Mhm.
and Silver had their own comic books.
Mhm.
Just because I think of the popularity of Westerns in general.
The
everywhere
franchise
at that
just.
time.
Hmm. Okay.
Well, this has to be a very popular course. I
Yeah.
could see students fighting for a seat to get into it. I mean, even
Yeah.
if they're not a history major. I guess my question would be, is there anything that you would talk about concerning this course that we haven't asked you?
Well, when you mention students, yes, students love this course and they want to take it. But when I was reading the IDEA evaluations
Mhm.
for the last time I taught it, which was last semester,
Those are fun.
yes, they are. A student said, I was expecting this to be an easy A.
Oh, wow.
no.
And what I got instead was a more layered understanding of racial dynamics in America than in any of the history courses I've taken.
Great.
Did you trick him into learning history?
Great.
Pretty much, yes.
Well, that's neat. So, how often do you teach it?
It's on the regular rotation now, so once
Yeah.
every 2 years.
Okay.
I did it. The first time I did it was an honors colloquium,
Hmm.
Mhm.
and then I did it as a special topics course 2 or 3 times, and then I got it in the regular rotation. There really are so many ways to look at U.S. history through
Yes.
this lens.
Mhm.
I know. I was looking at some of the required text and just kind of researching, reading about them, and the themes that they cover are very interesting.
In fact, if you think about Stan Lee, Marvel Comics, the early 1960s, all those superheroes introduced then got their powers from radiation, as opposed to the 1930s. It was magic. But now all of a sudden it's a side effect
Mhm.
of the atomic age.
Mhm.
So
There's that.
the real life is creeping in.
Yeah.
In fact, you've probably heard of the X-Men.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That was introduced in 1964, and the premise was Professor X right, is giving this speech that mutation is becoming more common, and he's got all these teenagers. Well, if they're teenagers in 1964, they were born in the mid-40s
Oh, yeah.
when the atomic testing
Mhm.
started.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of American history
Yes.
in all these
Well, thank you for
Yeah.
coming to talk with us. It's like you said, maybe we'll go for part 3 before long.
I'm ready to go read some of these graphic
good,
novels.
Good.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank y'all for
I
having
enjoyed
me
it.
again.
Yeah, and this book it's available in the Tech Bookstore. Maybe?
I think it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I've seen it. Yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah.
The United States of America has some of the best institutions of higher education in the world. People come from countries all over the world to study here. We'd like to think the faculty are a big part of what makes our colleges and universities so attractive. Most academics spend their entire careers studying their chosen field and its many facets, while others may focus on one particular part of a topic and go in depth to learn all they can about the specifics. You may ask, why? Why would someone devote their life to studying a certain field? On this podcast, we're asking that too. We're also just having a good time getting to know the interesting people on campus we wouldn't otherwise have an opportunity to chat with. We're talking with our colleagues about their chosen fields of study, how they got interested in the subject, and what they've discovered about it so far. We hope you find our discussions as interesting as we find our fellow academics. Some topics we discuss overlap the general education courses all students getting a college degree take, while other topics are in subjects students take in upper level courses for their major. And some topics are even more specific than that. You may not study them unless you're getting an advanced degree. So listen closely. What we talk about may be on the quiz.